Wow, can you believe that the first month of the new year has already ended? Now, I heard a news anchor say that January goes by fast for anyone with a robust bank account. Funnily true, right? Now, I hope by all means that you have had an amazing beginning of the year, especially with us starting it with God in the place of prayer. And I also hope that your altar continues to be vibrant and that your prayer fire is burning bright. Let me warmly welcome us to what can be referred to as this channel's official first video. After the 7 days of daily prayers, that was my New Year episode. This is also the fourth installment of the question and answer series on family life and relationships. My name is Nike Ayola, and this is my channel called Ask Pastor Nike. Now, I have one quick request. Please make sure that you watch this video to the end. Look, I guarantee that the end is the best part that nobody should miss. You will thank me for this by the time you are done, honestly. Now, this is the question that I carried over from the last video of 2025. Emotions are real, especially when you spend time with someone often. How can we manage our emotions wisely without being cold but still maintaining godly boundaries? And here is a quick reminder of my assigned quote for the series that I believe will center us as we explore the answers to this question and others. The Bible is God's blueprint for choice. It is clear on what must drive our desires so we can please God and derive maximum benefits from our choices. Now, I will continue to highlight this quote as we go through this series of questions and answers throughout 2026, with the hope and prayer that some of us will pay attention to what we need to know. You see, some of us are very, very smart, with incredible IQs and all that. But no matter how smart you are and how much you know, or how emotionally strong or intelligent you have become, you are still not in the league of God, who knows everything, past, present, and future. And He, God, tells us what we should be doing in Proverbs 4 and verse 23. So, above all, guard the affections of your heart, for they affect all that you are. Pay attention to the welfare of your innermost being, for from there flows the wellspring of life. Sometimes some of us are despondent, because we think God is not responding to us or answering our prayers, especially when we're in desperate situations. We keep asking, and expending emotional energy with little or no relief because we are asking or expecting God to reinvent the wheel on our account and give us solutions to what He's already told us about in His Word. God blessed us with emotions, no doubt. But He has also empowered us and created credible and legal routes by which we can keep those emotions in check. And because God is not in the business, of doing for us what He has already empowered us to do for ourselves, it becomes our responsibility to learn about what we've been freely given, in terms of resources to checkmate rabid emotions and what boundaries God Himself has put in place for our safeguarding. Now, let's look again at a key phrase in the question as we talk about how we are emotionally wired as humans: maintaining godly boundaries. Now, the wise management of our emotions will be largely dependent on our ability to recognize and adhere to the boundaries lovingly placed around all our relationships by a good God. And that's why we are told to pay attention to the welfare of our spirits and guard the affections of our souls, the things that we love, the desires that we pursue above all other things that we do. This is because ultimately, these things, these affections and desires will directly impact our futures and affect all that we become. You want the honest, unvarnished truth? Every human heart is designed to be automatically drawn towards anyone it is investing emotional capital into and to respond in kind to another heart that is there for it, especially when it feels that there are no ulterior motives or underlying reasons. The human soul, including the souls of our children, yearns for two things most importantly: affection and affirmation. And so, especially when there is a perception of starvation of either or both, it will automatically gravitate towards anyone and anywhere these two things can be provided, irrespective of whether you think they are appropriate or not. The heart wants what it wants. Now, this is not attempting to make excuses for anyone, but I will be one to admit that some bizarre things do happen in relationships, that sometimes blindside those in it, as well as many people watching from the sidelines. But honestly, after we have completed being appropriately horrified, we will still have to get to the point where we acknowledge that it is not a mysterious aberration after all, but a manifestation of not paying attention and guarding properly the affections of our hearts. Can a man or woman carry fire in his or her bosom and not be burned? Now, emotional intimacy can exist between any two human beings, and they don't need to be married before it can happen. If you expend emotional currency on any relationship, and marriage just happens to be one, if you are emotionally invested, by spending time together, whether it is physically or spiritually, which of course defies physical contact, or mentally, through the internet or social media platforms, and especially by phone calls, where you are connected by voice, you will build up intimacy, which will become a huge, massive problem if the other person is not your spouse or intended. Funny enough, every time the word intimacy is mentioned, minds gravitate towards sexual activities. Come on now. Intimacy is a much bigger word than sex. After all, we have intimacy with God and we're not sleeping with Him, right? Yeah. We talk about sexual intimacy because there are other ways of being intimate with another person that don't involve sex. But sexual involvement does create a level of intimacy among humans that is extremely powerful. And a very common pathway, what usually happens is for unchecked and sometimes illegal emotional intimacy between two people of the opposite gender to gradually and eventually develop into sexual intimacy. And you will agree with me that this has been known to be a common progression or outcome for relationships between best friends, relatives, including siblings, colleagues, bosses and secretaries, between the boss, or what we call Oga in Nigerian English, and the hired female help or house girl, and sometimes between the madam of the house and a male hired help, when emotional intimacy is allowed to develop unchecked in such relationships. The truth is that long before there was any form of physical or sexual intimacy, every person who fell into this emotional entrapment had crossed the line, the boundary placed by God for such relationships in their hearts already. And the proof that the sin is wider and deeper than the act is in Jesus telling us that guilt is established by the thoughts and emotions, not necessarily the physical doing. Because nobody, at least nobody who is not a commercial sex worker, jumps into bed with a total stranger. Now, these are my suggestions to those who want to manage their emotions wisely and make them the blessing they truly are. Number one, deal with yourself according to knowledge. You have to understand the kind of person you are and know your personal triggers, as well as the kinds of people and places you must avoid. If, for example, you are a reformed alcoholic, you must be careful to avoid bars and saloons. You have no point to prove to anyone about your strength and capacity. And God doesn't need you to be the evangelist who will take the gospel to the souls that are perishing in such places. Face your weaknesses and areas of challenge with humble reality and make the effort to avoid situations that can suck you under. Don't lie to yourself. Self deceit is the worst kind of deception. Number two, always set boundaries for yourself and others in every relationship. You know how far you or others can go and what you can or cannot do. Relationships, including marriages that have no boundaries, are disasters waiting to happen. No boundary means no control, and therefore a relationship where anything can happen. Now, I know ministers and counselors who will never have exclusive one on one sessions with any client of the opposite gender unless their spouses are present. And I've heard of men and women who won't visit a single colleague or an attached friend of the opposite sex in their home or invite them to theirs. And please, this is wisdom, not paranoia. Communicate your boundaries to your spouse clearly as help for you and not a command. If, for example, you know that you are a sucker for good food and your wife is a career woman, let her know that preparing your meals personally is a help that you need from her, to stop you from getting emotionally attached to any other alternative that is supposed to make life easier for her, like a house help or a living sibling. And not a demand for submission because you are the head of the family or a command to stop her from working so she can cook your meals. I bet you that most wives will be willing to bend over backwards and move heaven and earth to accommodate your request because she wants peace for herself as well. Hidden or secret boundaries are no use. So let everyone you have a relationship with know what your boundaries are. You can't hold them responsible for violating a boundary that they never knew existed. Finally, under this point, if your boundaries will make others label you as cold or insensitive, then so be it. You're not under any obligation to please men, and you cannot afford to sacrifice your relationship on the altar of good reputation. Number three, get smart and live in awareness of the people and situations around you. In other words, deal with other people according to knowledge. Wisdom is the principal thing, just like the Bible already tells us. And since wisdom can be simply defined as the correct application of knowledge and understanding, you and I have to make it our responsibility to get or imbibe both of these crucial elements, knowledge and understanding, first and foremost. And you know what? God has made it easier for us to get to wisdom after we make the effort to acquire knowledge and understanding so that we are totally without excuse. James chapter 1 and verse 5 tells us this. But if anyone is deficient in wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously without reprimand, and it will be given to him. Uninformed simplicity, and foolish empathy can be dangerous enough to terminate your legitimate relationships. Many of us are so gullible, especially our men folk, so fixated on what we think is our own mission and purpose, what we imagine that we are after, and believe me, it can be totally altruistic. We are so fixated on what is inside us that we fail to see or understand that others are making their own plans and working in their own best interest as well. Now, I was having a conversation, with an honored and well-respected teacher of mine the other day. And he told me about the thrill of conquest that natural men feel or get when they succeed in sleeping with a woman, and especially one who had been playing hard to get before. I simply laughed and reminded him of this brilliant quote by I don't know who, that a man chases a woman until she catches him. So what will these conquering and smart in my own eyes men do when they find out that was the woman's plan all along? Tell me. Look. The need to be needed is innate in all of us, and every normal human being will gravitate towards anywhere they receive affection and affirmation. But while we women, get a lot of these needs satisfied by raising a family, and maybe this is the reason why some mothers find it so difficult to release their children, into their own futures and are constantly interfering in their children's marriages. I don't know, just maybe. We need to realize that our men folk don't have a similar outlet. And this is why some men, because of foolish empathy and this need to be needed, get themselves into compromising situations, that jeopardize their family's well-being and even existence. Like I said in an earlier video, if you are spending a lot of time with anybody who is not your spouse, seeing them physically, talking with them on the phone often, thinking about solutions to their problems and all of that, you will begin to expend emotional capital on the wrong person. And as you do, you will progressively rob your own spouse and your relationship of affection because you are giving it to someone else. A weak and helpless woman, and it can be genuine or not, is a magnet for a lot of unsuspecting men. This is why God tells us to guard the affections of our hearts diligently. This is why you and I need wisdom, even in showing empathy, kindness, and friendship to people around us. Because it's only God who sees motives and reads intentions. We don't. He's the only one who can accurately predict the future because he has seen every possible scenario already. So we must learn to trust and rely on him, even in the dispensing of our acts of kindness and empathy. Finally, number 4, and this is for those who find that they are already on this slippery slope of shifting affection or who can decipher a trend in that direction. And this point is actually a double-edged sword because there is a part that loved ones need to play here as well. You need to be alert to the true conditions of your own heart and own your own feelings before God. Confronting yourself with the truth and admitting affection is growing in your heart for the wrong person is your first step towards deliverance from the trap of the enemy. If you lie to yourself, that you are all right, then the Holy Spirit cannot help you. In fact, Your ability to recognize what is going on is the beginning of victory for you, because most people already caught in this web cannot. The next step is to go before God and admit to what you've allowed your heart to feel. And yes, take responsibility. You and nobody else is responsible for guarding the affections of your heart. Repent and ask God for strength and wisdom to let go and to dismantle every unholy structure that has been erected. You have to cut this other person completely off from your life at this point, even if the Lord will allow you to have a correctly defined relationship with them in the future. Cut off all ties and ask for reinforcement from trusted people if necessary, because the other person might try to break your resolve with tears and how they can't do without you. And that's a fallacy that we often love to embrace, by the way, because of the sense of importance it fits our ego with. Look, even a newborn can survive without its birth mother if an unfortunate accident happens. So it's pure hype when we say or think we can't do with another human being. The only person we can't do without is God. Finally, allow the Lord to heal your heart and emotions and commit to seeking His guidance in everything going forward. This is one side of the double-edged sword. The other side is the help and assistance that we need to be providing for loved ones who may be sleeping or have slipped away from their legitimate relationships as spouses, siblings, parents, or friends. It's true that eyes look forward. And often it takes those looking in from the outside, to recognize that something is going wrong. So understand when you are calling out the wrong things you're observing, and the person you are trying to help can't seem to see it or disagrees with you. The best way is to be gentle in your approach at pointing out wrong, because aggression and insensitivity will only produce a pushback in an undesired direction. That's why the Bible teaches us to only speak the truth in love. The person you are trying to help is not mean or evil or being disrespectful. The truth is that they can't see what you are seeing because they are the ones in it. So please don't give up or walk away, because your persistence is exactly what they need at that point in time. Affections and emotions can sometimes blind the eye. So if they are already far gone, you may need to switch to the strategy of prayer. And I mean prayer for deliverance, because at that point, you are dealing with more than the one person that you are intervening for. Our good God, in His infinite mercies, is committed to handling everything outside our control that we bring before Him. Now, let me round up this video by speaking directly to the spouses, especially wives of people who may be caught in this kind of situation, of growing emotional intimacy or attachment to someone else other than you. And it could be anybody, someone you knew and trusted, or someone you connected your spouse to by yourself, or someone you hired, or even a total stranger. The first useful advice you need is this: take the attention off yourself and your feelings. Your spouse needs rescuing at this point. So it's not about what they did to you or how they disrespected you and all of that. Look, that other person is hoping that you will go up in arms, hoping and praying that you will become combative and unyielding and make life unbearable for your spouse so he or she can come running back to their fake peace. Pray for grace and strength if need be. And I assure you that God speedily answers such prayers so you can reel your spouse back to yourself through understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. But he or she hasn't said they're sorry. So how can I move on? Yes, that's why it's called forgiveness. You give it before the sorry comes. And believe me, it will come once the scales fall off from their eyes, because you have decided to honor God by your obedience. He doesn't deserve it because I gave him or her everything. We don't deserve anything from God either, but He freely gives to us anyway. Is it your marriage you want, or people's validation that you have suffered? Do you want to shortchange your children and raise them in dysfunctionality because you want to prove a point? Be prepared to fight for your marriage, because other people are too busy fighting for theirs to give you long-term support. That is the honest, unvarnished truth. The second advice, which is so important, is this: be intentional about creating an atmosphere of affection, support, affirmation, and validation for your spouse. And in most cases, this is the husband. I mentioned earlier that the need to be needed is already catered for in women naturally, by reason of motherhood. But it is something that you build for the men. Now, if you're a strong woman and you can manage everything by yourself, good for you. But you must also learn to control your strength and come to your husband in humility still. It's not faking weakness, but totally godly wisdom, okay? Every man, and especially a husband, is pulled towards the need for his strength and capabilities. So even if he loves you and his family, but senses that you don't need him, if you don't validate him by your words and actions, and if you don't give appreciation even for assigned roles and responsibilities, he can be pulled either willingly or kicking and screaming towards another woman who offers him these same things. And unfortunately, many men can't decipher when it's fake or a setup. So be ready to fight for your spouse's affection and the stability of your relationship by giving affection, affirmation, and validation freely. The good thing about it is that even if it is not yet your reality, I mean, if your spouse doesn't yet possess these qualities, your confession is bound to bring it to life. Lastly, cover your spouse's vulnerability. People are very sensitive about their vulnerable points. You need to make yourself the safe space that your spouse longs to come to. Be deliberate about plugging all the holes and the gaps that are his or her weaknesses. And don't poke fun at or trivialize any weakness that he or she allows you to see or know about. You are in each other's lives as covering. And even as you pray for their deliverance and victory, be mindful of the triggers that expose their weaknesses and do everything in your power to help them overcome. Honestly, when I started with this question, I had no clue about where the Spirit was going to be taking us. But I'm glad, and I hope you are too, that I allowed Him to take the lead. This video is much longer than I ever imagined it would be. But then, the more important thing is that all angles are considered and everyone is blessed and enriched. I am, and I pray that you are too. So, see you next time with another episode of the question and answer series on Ask Pastor Nike. Remember to subscribe, share, like, and comment. You are blessed. Shalom.